Chapter 6. How the Portuguese made a beautiful auto-da-fe to prevent any further earthquakes, and how Candide was publicly whipped. After the earthquake had destroyed 3/4 of Lisbon, the sages of that country could think of no means more effectual to prevent utter ruin than to give the people a beautiful auto-da-fe, for it had been decided by the University of Coimbra that the burning of a few people alive by a slow fire and with great ceremony is an infallible secret to hinder the earth from quaking. In consequence hereof, they had seized on a Biscayner, convicted of having married his godmother, and on 2 Portuguese for rejecting the bacon which larded a chicken they were eating. After dinner, they came and secured Dr. Pangloss and his disciple Candide, the one for speaking his mind, and the other for having listened with an air of approbation. They were conducted to separate apartments, extremely cold, as they were never incommoded by the sun. 8 days after they were dressed in San Benitos, and their heads ornamented with paper mitres. The mitres and San Benito belonged to Candide, were painted with reversed flames and with devils that had neither tails nor claws. But Pangloss' devil had claws and tails, and the flames were upright. They marched in procession, thus habited, and heard a very pathetic sermon, followed by fine church music. Candide was whipped in cadence while they were singing. The Biscayner and the 2 men who had refused to eat bacon were burnt, and Pangloss was hanged, though that was not the custom. The same day the earth sustained a most violent concussion. Candide, terrified, amazed, desperate, all bloody, all palpitating, said to himself, "If this is the best of possible worlds, what then are the others? Well, if I had been only whipped, I could put up with it, for I experienced that among the Bulgarians. But oh, my dear Pangloss, the greatest of philosophers, that I should have seen you hanged without knowing for what! Oh, my dear Anabaptist, the best of men, that thou shouldn't have been drowned in the very harbor! Oh, Miss Cunegonde, the pro of girls, that thou shouldn't have had the belly ripped open!" Thus he was musing, scarce able to stand, preached at, whipped, absolved, and blessed, when an old woman accosted him, saying, "My son, take courage and follow me." Chapter 7. How the old woman took care of Candide, and how he found the object he loved. Candide did not take courage, but followed the old woman to a decayed house, where she gave him a pot of pomatum to anoint his sores, showed him a very neat little bed with a suit of clothes hanging up, and left him something to eat and drink. "Eat, drink, sleep," said she, "and may Our Lady of Antocha, the great Saint Anthony of Padua, the great Saint James of Compostela, receive you under their protection. I shall be back tomorrow." Candide, amazed at all he had suffered, and still more with the charity of the old woman, wished to kiss her hand. "It is not my hand you must kiss," said the old woman. "I shall be back tomorrow. Anoint yourself with the pomatum, eat and sleep." Candide, notwithstanding so many disasters, ate and slept. The next morning the old woman brought him his breakfast, looked at his back, and rubbed it herself with another ointment. In like manner she brought him his dinner, and at night she returned with his supper. The day following she went through the very same ceremonies. "Who are you," said Candide, "who has inspired you with so much goodness? What return can I make you?" The good woman made no answer. She returned in the evening, but brought no supper. "Come with me," she said, "and say nothing." She took him by the arm and walked with him about a quarter of a mile into the country. They arrived at a lonely house, surrounded with gardens and canals. The old woman knocked at a little door. It opened. She led Candide up a private staircase into a small apartment richly furnished. She left him on a brocaded sofa, shut the door, and went away. Candide thought himself in a dream, indeed, that he had been dreaming unluckily all his life, and that the present moment was the only agreeable part of it all. The old woman returned very soon, supporting with difficulty a trembling woman of a majestic figure, brilliant with jewels and covered with a veil. "Take off that veil," said the old woman to Candide. The young man approaches. He raises the veil with a timid hand. Oh, what a moment! What surprise! He believes he beholds Miss Cunegonde. He really sees her. It is herself. His strength fails him. He cannot utter a word, but drops at her feet. Cunegonde falls upon the sofa. The old woman supplies a smelling bottle. They come to themselves and recover their speech, as they begin with broken accent, with questions and answers interchangeably interrupted with signs, with tears and cries. The old woman desired they would make less noise, and then she left them to themselves. "What? Is it you?" said Candide. "You live? I find you again in Portugal? Then you have not been ravished? Then they did not rip open your belly as Dr. Pangloss informed me?" "Yes, they did," said the beautiful Cunegonde. "But those two accidents are not always mortal." "But were your father and mother killed?" "It is but too true," answered Cunegonde in tears. And your brother?" "My brother also was killed." "And why are you in Portugal? And how did you know of my being here? And by what strange adventure did you contrive to bring me to this house?" "I will tell you all that," replied the lady. "But first of all, let me know your history, since the innocent kiss you gave me and the kicks which you received." Candide respectfully obeyed her, and though he was still in a surprise, though his voice was feeble and trembling, though his back still pained him, yet he gave her a most ingenuous account of everything that had befallen him since the moment of their separation. Cunegonde lifted up her eyes to heaven, shed tears upon hearing of the death of the good Anabaptist and of Pangloss, after which she spoke as follows to Candide, who did not lose a word and devoured her with his eyes. Chapter 8. The History of Cunegonde. I was in bed and fast asleep when it pleased God to send the Bulgarians to our delightful castle of Thunder Ten Tronckh. They slew my father and brother, and cut my mother in pieces. A tall Bulgarian, 6 feet high, perceiving that I had fainted away at this sight, began to ravish me. This made me recover. I regained my senses, and I cried, I struggled, I bit, I scratched. I wanted to tear out the tall Bulgarian's eyes, not knowing that what happened at my father's house was the usual practice of war. The brute gave me a cut in the left side with his hanger, and the mark is still upon me. "Ah, I hope I shall see it," said honest Candide. "You shall," said Cunegonde, "but let us continue." "Do so," replied Candide. Thus she resumed the thread of her story. "A Bulgarian captain came in, saw me all bleeding, and the soldier not in the least disconcerted. The captain flew into a passion at the disrespectful behavior of the brute, and slew him on my body. He ordered my wounds to be dressed and took me to his quarters as a prisoner of war. I wished the few shirts that he had. I did his cooking. He thought me very pretty. He avowed it. On the other hand, I must own he had a good shape and a soft and white skin, but he had little or no mind or philosophy, and you might see plainly that he had never been instructed by Dr. Pangloss. In 3 months' time, having lost all his money and being grown tired of my company, he sold me to a Jew named Don Issachar, who traded to Holland and Portugal, and had a strong passion for woman. This Jew was much attached to my person, but could not triumph over it. I resisted him better than the Bulgarian soldier. A modest woman may be ravished once, but her virtue is strengthened by it. In order to render me more tractable, he brought me to this country house. Hitherto, I had imagined that nothing could equal the beauty of Thunder Ten Tronckh Castle, but I found I was mistaken. The Grand Inquisitor, seeing me one day at Mass, stared long at me and sent to tell me that he wished to speak on private matter. I was conducted to his palace, where I acquainted him with the history of my family, and he represented to me how much it was beneath my rank to belong to an Israelite. A proposal was then made to Don Issachar that he should resign me to my lord. Don Issachar, being the court banker and a man of credit, would hear nothing of it. The inquisitor threatened him with an auto da fe. At last my Jew, intimidated, concluded a bargain, by which the house and myself should belong to both in common. The Jew should have for himself Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and the inquisitor should have the rest of the week. It is now 6 months since this agreement was made. Quarrels have not been waiting, for they could not decide whether the night from Saturday to Sunday belonged to the old law or to the new. For my part, I have so far held out against both, and I verily believe that this is the reason why I am still beloved. At length, to avert the scourge of earthquake and to intimidate Don Issachar, my Lord Inquisitor was pleased to celebrate an auto da fe. He did me the honor to invite me to the ceremony, and I had a very good seat, and the ladies were served with refreshments between Mass and the execution. I was in truth seized with horror at the burning of those two Jews, and of the honest Biscayner who had married his godmother. But what was my surprise, my fright, my trouble, when I saw in a San Benito and a mitre a figure which resembled that of Pangloss. I rubbed my eyes. I looked at him attentively. I saw him hang. I fainted. Scarcely had I recovered my senses, and I saw you stripped, stark naked, and this was the height of my horror, consternation, grief, and despair. I tell you truthfully that your skin is yet whiter and of a more perfect color than that of my Bulgarian captain. This spectacle redoubled all the feelings which overwhelmed and devoured me. I screamed out, and I would have said, "Stop, barbarians!" but my voice failed me, and my cries would have been useless after you had been severely whipped. "How is it possible," said I, "that the beloved Candide and the wise Pangloss should both be at Lisbon, the one to receive 100 lashes, and the other to be hanged by the Grand Inquisitor, of whom I'm the well-beloved? Pangloss most cruelly deceived me when he said that everything in the world is for the best." Agitated, lost, sometimes beside myself, and sometimes ready to die of weakness, my mind was filled with the massacre of my father, mother, and brother, with the insolence of the ugly Bulgarian soldier, with the stab that he gave me, with my servitude under the Bulgarian captain, with my hideous Don Issachar, with my abominable inquisitor, with the execution of Dr. Pangloss, with the grand miserere to which they whipped you, and especially with the kiss I gave you behind the screen the day that I had last seen you. I praised God for bringing you back to me after so many trials, and I charged my old woman to take care of you, and to conduct you hither as soon as possible. She has executed her commission perfectly well. I have tasted the inexpressible pleasure of seeing you again, of hearing you, of speaking with you, but you must be hungry. For myself, I am famished. Let us have supper. They both sat down to the table, and when supper was over, they placed themselves once more on the sofa, where they were when Signor Don Issachar arrived. It was the Jewish Sabbath, and Issachar had come to enjoy his rights and to explain his tender love. Chapter 9. What became of Cunegonde, Candide, the Grand Inquisitor, and the Jew? This Issachar was the most choleric Hebrew that had ever been seen in Israel since the captivity in Babylon. "What?" said he. "Though bit of a Galilean, was not the Inquisitor enough for thee? Must this rascal also share with me?" In saying this, he drew a long poniard which he always carried about him, and not imagining that his adversary had any arms, he threw himself upon Candide. But our honest Westphalian had received a handsome sword from the old woman, along with the suit of clothes. He drew his rapier, despite his gentleness, and laid the Israelite stone dead upon the cushions at Cunegonde's feet. "Holy Virgin!" cried she, "what will become of us? A man killed in my apartment. If the officers of justice come, we are lost." "Had not Pangloss been hanged," said Candide, "he will give us good counsel in this emergency, for he was a profound philosopher. Failing him, let us consult the old woman." She was very prudent and commenced to give her opinion, when suddenly another little door opened. It was an hour after midnight. It was the beginning of Sunday. This day belonged to my lord the Inquisitor. He entered, and saw the whipped Candide, sword in hand, a dead man upon the floor, Cunegonde aghast, and the old woman giving counsel. At this moment the following is what passed in the soul of Candide, and how he reasoned. If this holy man call in assistance, he will surely have me burnt, and Cunegonde will perhaps be served in the same manner. He was the cause of my being cruelly whipped. He is my rival, and as I have now begun to kill, I will kill away, for there is no time to hesitate. This reasoning was clear and instantaneous, so that without giving time to the Inquisitor to recover from his surprise, he perceived him through, and cast him beside the Jew. "Yet again," said Cunegonde, "how there is no mercy for us. We are excommunicated. Our last hour has come. How could you do it, you naturally so gentle, to slay a Jew and a prelate in 2 minutes?" "My beautiful young lady," responded Candide, "when one is a lover, jealous, and whipped by the Inquisition, one stops at nothing." The old woman then put in her word, saying, "There are 3 Andalusian horses in the stable with bridles and saddles. Let the brave Candide get them ready. Madame has money, jewels. Let us therefore mount quickly on horseback. Though I can sit only on one buttock, let us set out for Cadiz. It is the finest weather in the world, and there is great pleasure in traveling in the cool of the night." Immediately Candide saddled the 3 horses, and Cunegonde, the old woman, and he traveled 30 miles at a stretch. While they were journeying, the Holy Brotherhood entered the house. My lord the Inquisitor was interred in a handsome church, and Issachar's body was thrown upon a dunghill. Candide, Cunegonde, and the old woman had now reached the little town of Avicena in the midst of the mountains of the Sierra Morena, and were speaking as follows in a public inn. Chapter 10. In what distress Candide, Cunegonde, and the old woman arrived at Cadiz, and of their embarkment. "Who was it that robbed me of my money and jewels?" said Cunegonde, all bathed in tears. "How shall we live? What shall we do? Where find inquisitors or Jews who will give me more?" "Alas," said the old woman, "I have a shrewd suspicion of a reverend Grey Friar who stayed last night in the same inn with us at Badajoz. God preserve me from judging rashly, but he came into our room twice, and he set out upon his journey long before us." "Alas," said Candide, "dear Pangloss has often demonstrated to me that the goods of this world are common to all men, and that each has an equal right to them. But according to these principles, the Grey Friar ought to have left us enough to carry us through our journey. Have you nothing at all left, my dear Cunegonde?" "Not a farthing," said she. "What then must we do?" said Candide. "Sell one of the horses," replied the old woman. "I will ride behind Miss Cunegonde, though I can hold myself only on one buttock, and we shall reach Cadiz." In the same inn there was a Benedictine prior who bought the horse for a cheap price. Candide, Cunegonde, and the old woman, having passed through Lucena, Chilas, and Labrixia, arrived at length at Cadiz. A fleet was there getting ready, and troops assembling to bring to reason the reverend Jesuit fathers of Paraguay, accused of having made one of the native tribes in the neighborhood of Saint Sacrament revolt against the kings of Spain and Portugal. Candide, having been in the Bulgarian service, performed the military exercise before the general of this little army with so graceful an address, with so intrepid an air, and with such agility and expedition, that he was given the command of a company of foot. Now he was a captain. He set sail with Miss Cunegonde, the old woman, 2 valets, and the 2 Andalusian horses, which had belonged to the Grand Inquisitor of Portugal. During their voyage they reasoned a good deal on the philosophy of poor Pangloss. "We are going into another world," said Candide, "and surely it must be there that all is for the best. For I must confess there is reason to complain a little of what passeth in our world in regard to both natural and moral philosophy." "I love you with all my heart," said Cunegonde, "but my soul is still full of fright at that which I have seen and experienced." "All will be well," replied Candide. "The sea of this new world is already better than our European sea. It is calmer, the winds more regular. It is certainly the new world which is the best of all possible worlds." "God grant it," said Cunegonde, "but I have been so horribly unhappy there that my heart is almost closed to hope." "You complain," said the old woman. "Alas, you have not known such misfortunes as mine." Cunegonde almost broke out laughing, finding the good woman very amusing for pretending to have been as unfortunate as she. "Alas," said Cunegonde, "for my good mother, unless you have been ravished by 2 Bulgarians, have received 2 deep wounds in your belly, have had 2 castles demolished, have had 2 mothers cut to pieces before your eyes, and 2 of your lovers whipped at an auto-da-fe. I do not conceive how you could be more unfortunate than I, at that I was born of a baroness of 72 quarterings, and have been a cock. Miss, replied the old woman, you do not know my birth, and were I to show you my backside, you would not talk in that manner, but would suspend your judgment. This speech having raised extreme curiosity in the minds of Cunegonde and Candide, the old woman spoke to them as follows.